This video demonstrates linking the side seam and the underarm seam of the tiny cardigan. This seam is worked in one pass by hanging the sweater sleeve and side seam onto the linker pins right sides together. Begin by hanging one of the knit facing sides of the sleeve onto the linker pins, taking care to hang just the selvage edge or the edgemost column of stitches above the pins. Hanging single jersey with the knit side facing you is pretty easy and straightforward. You can see, or you should be able to see, the break between the selvage wale and the next set of stitches in. Hang these stitches carefully, making sure that, again, you're only picking up that selvage most edge column of stitches. Continue hanging the side seam, again making sure that you're only picking up that selvage column of stitches. It gets a little bit trickier in half fisherman's rib, but you should be able to hang these on the pins with relative ease. Again, just work slowly and double check your work. You can pull down on the work after it's been hung on the pins to get a slightly better view and to spot check, ensuring that you've only picked up that edge column of stitches. Once the first side of the side seam and the sleeve inseam are hung, hang the joining side. It's a little bit more difficult to hang this side since we're working with the purl side of the sleeve facing us and the opposing side of the half fisherman's rib. Work slowly. Again, make sure that you're only catching that edgemost column of stitches. To achieve the cleanest join on the linker, you need to work the chain stitch directly between two wales. If you inadvertently pick up half of a stitch from the adjacent row, you'll see a break in the seamlessness of the join. Admittedly, I did not do a phenomenal job, as you'll see at the end of this video, in hanging these pieces together. Again, take your time, work slowly, do your best to work as cleanly as you possibly can. When you reach the armhole, ensure that this seam will line up by hanging the last jersey stitch on the same pin as the last jersey stitch, in this instance from the sleeve of the segment that's already been hung on the machine. Same with the body or the side seam of the sweater. As I've been hanging this edge on the pins, I'm not necessarily easing anything in, but I'm giving myself a start and an end point at a couple different principal areas. So first at the rib of the sweater body hem, and then at the underarm point, so I can make sure that I'm not overextending, stretching, or gathering in the two edges to create waviness or unevenness in the join. You can save yourself a little bit of work by weaving any loose ends over and under the linker pins, which will get linked in or woven in as you join the seam. You can then just cut the tail once it's off the machine, of course after you've checked to make sure that you're happy with the seam, and avoid having to weave this into the seam allowance later. Don't forget when you begin linking to keep a little bit of manual tension on the yarn end, just to ensure that that first chain stitch forms properly. At the end of your seam, link for several stitches beyond the edge of the work before removing it from the linker. Cut the yarn between the needle and the linker to avoid having to rethread the needle when you use the linker for the opposing seam. Knock the loop off the looper and peel your work from the machine. Before pulling back the extra chain stitch, inspect your work carefully. Make sure that you've achieved a seamless join. I have not done a great job here. You can see where the seam has passed beyond the selvage edge of stitches. The underarm seam looks a bit better, but I would more than likely unravel this entire seam and relink it again. But if you're happy, pull back those extra chain stitches and pull the last loop through itself to lock off the end of the linking and prevent it from running or opening.